Hello folks, and welcome to the FTR Wide Open Pro Series here in Las Vegas Motor Speedway, where we are kicking off race number 3 of about a 12 race season, as these drivers are getting ready to take on what is called a pretty tough track. I'm Dylan Steinkruger, alongside me Jeremy and Steve Zabo up here in the booth, along with Triffin Davis down giving us his stats every once in a while. Currently the drivers are in qualifying and they're getting ready to go into happy hour. We're here to bring you all 94 laps of the race. We hope you enjoy our coverage, and we're going to give you a little pre-race before we get going. All of the drivers up here have done a little testing. Before we get started, Steve Zabo, what do you think is going to be the hardest part about this race and the racing?
Well, in practice, the setup was pretty good. It was free on exit. It was a little tight in the entrance, though, of each corner of both 1 and 3, and I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for these guys to get a hold of, not letting their cars drift up into the wall, because this track is kind of fickle. It's got so much grip on entrance, unless you let go of the throttle a little too much, and then it just takes your car and drifts it straight up to the wall. So I think the hardest part of that, based on what I found in practice, is just holding your line. And if you're in double file or even 3-wide racing at some points after a restart, it's definitely going to be a challenge for these guys to make sure they hold their line and not hit each other.
Well, I think that the drivers have done a good job so far handling with the way the track has changed over the weekend. There has been some drivers complaining about bottoming out problems entering the corner, and as Steve said, that the car really can get tight in the corner, and you know, it's going to be difficult racing in a pack here early on in the race and possibly late in the race if we have a late restart. Over to you, Steve.
No, I'll take it from there. Well, I think the toughest part for me for going out and practice, I think that you're going to see some problems if we have some green flag pit stops, is going to be these guys getting off a pit road. It's very slick getting on and it's very slick getting off, and I think somebody's bound to lose it somewhere in there. So on to last week's race at California Auto Club Speedway. Wow, folks, it was controversial race. There was a handful of cautions, 8 cautions for about 27 laps. Of the 14 cars, I believe, that started, only 5 of them finished. What are some of the problems that you saw in that race, Steve Zabo?
Well, that's actually not tragically the first time that's happened to this series. Before my 3-week vacation from Full Throttle Racing as a driver, that actually happened a little too often. I remember there was a race last season at Pocono. I finished second and I had half a transmission. There was a race at Phoenix near the end of the season where I finished third, and I was actually the last car running, and I got third because of a bad pit stop. And I think one of the reasons why that's happening is it's just lack of common sense. A lot of these guys, they're young, they haven't driven for real yet, and they think that since it's only a game, you can do whatever the hell you want. But what they don't realize is there are a couple people in here, and it's a shame that it's really not all of them, but there are a couple of people in here who are trying to contend for a championship here at the Wide Open Pro Series, and they start affecting the outcome of these races just because they can't use their heads. I'm not going to mention any names, but before I withdrew from this race, before I withdrew my number 66 Toyota out of this race, during practice, when I was out on the track, I noticed there were a lot of guys just overdriving every corner, hitting each other. There were actually a couple of very nasty flips in practice, so I'm not totally sure what to expect, because last time I checked, Vegas was a little bit deceiving on how hard it really is, and quite frankly, I think it's harder than California. It's tighter, it's smaller, and it is faster. Believe it or not, there's so much more banking. It is faster in California, so I think we should look out for a little trouble there.
Thank you, Steve. I think it's about time for the TacoBell.com trivia question. What sponsor was Joe Nemechek's car in the 1995 campaign? Was it Army, Fastenal, Carl's Jr., or McDonald's? If you'd like to...
And if you'd like to enter that, you can go ahead and type it into the comment bar right here on this video. And that was just a little thing we put in there. We're going to have some of those that are going to pop up around the show. If you'd like an answer, just click on them, and we'll give you the answer sometime, maybe next week, or maybe later on in the show. We'll have to see. But after that California races, I think these guys are still in their drivers' meeting. There were some changes that came apart from that league. Jeremy, you've read them.
No, sir.
What did you think of the changes to the league?
I think that the changes were good on one end and bad on one end. Some of the real changes were created off of one driver. I won't say the name, but I think that some of these rules could be good and some of them could be bad after this race, as we did have some real changes that could help and not so help this league. But yeah, Steve, over to you.
I'd just like to talk a little bit about one of those changes specifically that you mentioned, Jeremy. Recently, the Full Throttle managers and administrators got together and revised their approval list for the Wide Open Pro Series. In case you're not familiar with Full Throttle Racing in general, there are several different series that are run here. About every night there's a new race, or another series, I should say. But on Sunday is the Wide Open Pro Series, and these pro drivers are selected based on skill, cleanliness, attitude, and overall ability. And recently they revised the list a little bit. However, as many different drivers agree, it's kind of a split between who agree and who disagree. There are a few drivers on the list that many feel should not be on the list, and there are some on the not eligible list that should be able to drive in this series. And one key example of that, key example of somebody who should, in our opinion, be on the list is Ian Plash. He practiced with us today before he, like me, withdrew from the race. And he was fastest in the first practice session and was not allowed to race because he had not, apparently, according to the administrators, been around enough recently. Same situation with me. I recently came off a 3-week break from Full Throttle, but in the meantime I was driving iRacing and having fun with it, and I came back. I believe last Thursday was my first race back in the Nationwide Series, and I finished second. And then the next night I got fourth. And then this morning, the Sunday Short Track Series, Ian won the race, and I finished fourth. But yet neither of us are pro drivers, and the same goes with Steinkrieger too, Dylan. He's a good driver. He won a pro race a couple seasons ago, subbing for Cal Young, which actually cost me the championship, but that's beside the point. But what I really don't get how they judge these drivers, and quite frankly, if you ask me, I think their mindset was eliminate the competition. And I hate saying it, but I think that's what Brennan McGee and Hayden Rapau were working at.
Well, I think as this happy hour session winds down, what do you think, Dylan, what do you think this is going through these drivers' minds before this race?
Well, I think as these guys are getting ready, I think you've got to be worried about the speed of this track. These guys are barreling down these front stretch on this tiny little track. These straightaways, they are real small track.